Hey, third grade. So today we are going to be reading chapter 8 in Stuart Little. So before we get started, I want you to think about what happened in chapters 6 and 7. How did Stuart do in the race? Did he do well? Yeah, so he won the race, right? So that was super fun. Chapter 7 was such a fun chapter to read. It was very exciting. So let's see, in chapter 8, it's called Margalo. So Margalo, we know from reading the back of the book that is a beautiful little bird that comes into Stuart's life and becomes his best friend. So maybe we can make some predictions here about what we might be reading or what we might learn from reading the chapter of Margalo. So I might predict that maybe we'll learn some of Margalo's character traits. Maybe we'll learn why they become such good friends. A bird in the house, that might be a little bit adding some tension, maybe with Snowbell. I don't know. Let's read to find out. So chapter 8, Margalo, on page 47. Make sure you follow along with me. So, because he was so small, Stuart was often hard to find around the house. His father and his mother and his brother George seldom could locate him by looking for him. Usually they had to call him, and the house often echoed with the cries of, "Stuart, Stuart!" You would come into a room and he might be curled up in a chair, but you wouldn't see him. Mr. Little was in constant fear of losing him and never finding him again. He even made him a tiny red cap, such as hunters wear, so that he would be easier to see. One day when he was 7 years old, Stuart was in the kitchen watching his mother make tapioca pudding. He was feeling hungry, and when Mrs. Little opened the door of the electric refrigerator to get something, Stuart slipped inside to see if he could find a piece of cheese. He supposed, of course, his mother had seen him, and when the door swung shut, he realized he was locked in. It surprised him greatly. "Help," he called. "It's dark in here. It's cold in this refrigerator. Help, let me out. I'm getting colder by the minute." But his voice was not strong enough to penetrate the thick wall. In the darkness, he stumbled and fell into a saucer of prunes. The juice was cold. Stuart shivered and his teeth chattered together. It wasn't until half an hour later that Mrs. Little opened the door and found him standing on a butter plate, beating his arms together and trying to keep warm and blowing on his hands and hopping up and down. "Mercy," she cried. "Stuart, my poor little boy. How about a nip of brandy?" said Stuart. "I'm chilled to the bone." But his mother made him some hot broth instead and put him to bed in his cigarette box with a doll's hot water bottle against his feet. Even so, Stuart caught a bad cold, and this turned into bronchitis. And Stuart had to stay in bed for almost 2 weeks. During his illness, the other members of the family were extremely kind to Stuart. Mrs. Little played tic-tac-toe with him. George made him a soap bubble pipe and a bow and arrow. Mr. Little made him a pair of ice skates out of 2 paper clips. One cold afternoon, Mrs. Little was shaking her dustcloth out of the window when she noticed a small bird laying on the windowsill, apparently dead. She brought it in and put it in near the radiator, and in a short while, it fluttered its wings and opened its eyes. It was a pretty little hen bird, brown with a streak of yellow on her breast. The Littles didn't agree on what kind of bird she was. "She's a wall-eyed vireo," said George scientifically. "I think she looks more like a wren," said Mr. Little. Anyway, they fixed a place for her in the living room and fed her and gave her a cup of water. Soon she felt much better and went hopping around the house, examining everything with the greatest care and interest. Presently, she hopped upstairs and into Stuart's room where he was lying in bed. "Hello," said Stuart. "Who are you? Where did you come from?" "My name is Margalo," said the bird softly in a musical voice. "I come from fields tall with wheat, from pastures deep in fern and thistle. I come from vales of Meadow Street, and I love to whistle." Stuart sat bolt upright in bed. "Say that again," he said. "I can't," replied Margalo. "I have a sore throat." "So have I," said Stuart. "I've got bronchitis. You better not get too near me. You might catch it." "I'll stay right here by the door," said Margalo. "You can use some of my gargle if you want to," said Stuart. "And here are some nose drops, and I have plenty of Kleenex." "Thank you very much. You are very kind," replied the bird. Did they take your temperature? Asked Stuart, who was beginning to be genuinely worried about his new friend's health. No, said Margalo, but I don't think it will be necessary. Well, we better make sure, said Stuart, because I would hate to have anything happen to you. Here, and he tossed her the thermometer. Margalo put it under her tongue, and she and Stuart sat very still for 3 minutes. Then she took it out and looked at it, turning it slowly and carefully. Normal, she announced. Stuart felt his heart leap for gladness. It seemed to him that he had never seen any creature so beautiful as this tiny bird, and he already loved her. I hope, he remarked, that my parents have fixed you up with a decent place to sleep. Okay, so I'm going to stop right there, and I'm going to let you read the rest of it. So what else is going to happen with Margalo and Stuart? I wonder. So you read it, and then answer the questions, and then you are going to answer your chapter questions 6 through 8. So if you have any questions, be sure to ask me on Google Meet. Bye.